Terrarios here. I'm going to be talking about Japanese management. That is due to the Collaborate session that I missed this week, and thank gosh it's the last one I'll be missing. But I just wanted to talk about my takeaways and just kind of relatable aspects I've had on Japanese management, some new things I've learned. Growing up, this was kind of interesting to actually read more in depth. But growing up, my dad worked for a couple different Japanese companies in the printing business. So this was like something that definitely really attracted me to this chapter and gave me a better breakdown on how they actually work in their society and the different type of management forms they have, what type of culture they have, and how they run their business and why they've been so successful. So one of the main points that I came across was that they say that their future relies more on the societal and managerial change. They are continually growing, and going off that, they have the second largest economy in the world. I mean, Japan is fairly large, but going off the economic standpoint, that's huge. Another point that they talked about, especially just in the first couple of pages, was that 64 of their companies were listed on the Fortune Global 500 list for sales, and then 39 were on that list for market capitalization. Considering that many companies are on that list for, like 500 companies in the entire world is huge and phenomenal, and that's why they've been so successful, because they know how to run a business, they know how to work together, and they know how to be productive. Going off their macro or micro environment that they have, they're also based on the Confucian type culture that we talked about last week with the Chinese. So going off that kind of bases what they do for their management patterns and the practices that they use. And from a cultural standpoint, they still are very hierarchical. They result in order. They need change, but sometimes it can be hard. They're very group focused. Their basis is groupism, as it says. There is hierarchy between organizations. Higher education is very important, especially if the education is coming from bigger cities like Tokyo or something. Like, that's a main focus on whether they use that and use those people in a business or not. Is very education based, which is understandable, and that's definitely a point as to why they've been so successful. And when we look at it in the United States, it's obviously a huge thing too, but at the same point, you're getting a good education, just kind of depends where and what you want to do. And I mean, obviously there's a difference between Ambrose and going like Harvard, but they're very, very focused on that education portion, and that's why it is huge for them to be more successful overall. Coming from that, it was kind of weird to hear this, but I guess it's when you talk to someone from Japan or hear them talk, when it's basically talking like someone from a higher standard or to employees, they use like a surname, which is how they address them and shows kind of like their standing, which I thought was a little bit different. But I mean, in a way we kind of have that, but it's more direct in Japanese culture and in their management style. They're still like one of the things that kind of stood out was that very harmonious type of culture. They are very respectful. And another thing that was huge was the fact that their teachers actually get paid quite a bit and are very highly respected. Not saying in the United States that they're not, but if you look at the salary of people in the United States for teaching, nowhere near the standard of and how much they respect people in Japanese culture, which I thought was very different and unique, but it seemed very important. Obviously, they place a huge importance on education anyways, and so those people should be praised if that's the type of people they're looking for from a business standpoint. Another main point was due on page 34, when it kind of gave us like a comparative aspect of how Japanese workers are and American workers, and just the patience, harmony, and hierarchy, and how we all act through that. Going off that, Japanese are very cultural, harmonious, peaceful type people, whereas in the United States we're very like that controlling, like to the point, like we need to get going, and the risk taking type. Whereas Japanese culture is they're kind of cautious, but yes, they need change, but into like almost like a book type of structure, and that's exactly what they need. Obviously, we're two very successful countries, global economies, you name it, but we run completely different. So it's brought me to a point, a huge takeaway from growing up, knowing people from Japanese business, and then understanding the way my father was. Like, he's a very direct type person, likes to get things done, but he's very just kind of relaxed type of feel. So you could just tell that even though he is a Mexican American, he was working with people from Japanese culture, actually from Japan, and somehow they made it work and are really good friends and did business very well. So it's not impossible, and this was something I grew up around, so it made me want to be more involved in international business anyways. Um, and learning and going through this class is huge too because I'm actually having an internship at a company that's German based. And I mean, I don't really know much about German culture, but it's something I can learn and build and have experience through that as well with working with a German company and being a Mexican American student that hasn't had that international experience. Um, Going off that again, as we talk from like Hofstede's, um, like his cultural dimensions, it's very relatable to the Chinese, where they're very masculine based. They have a patient type culture, but their biggest thing that kind of was different to me but understandable is they have a very high level of distrust towards outsiders. They're very like that group based, like they understand each other, and that's kind of how they build and get that support. Based off of from like a government type standpoint, that kind of stood out. Just kind of looking at the that type of culture, I guess, was that their government supports the bigger companies because they're very solely based on building that economic status, basically. Um, they are very male oriented, very masculine. There was even a note talking about that the job security for full time male employees is much larger. They're definitely more conservative, more conforming, but even looking back at the economy after World War II, they've gradually just continuing to grow and be more successful. And then when we talk about their managers, they're very direct type people, as I mentioned before. They have the older managers. They look very, very in depth to their work experience, to their education, to what they've built from there. And then they usually work for that company for a while. Tenure is huge for them. I mean, going off this, I know it's kind of choppy little video today, but understanding this was different, but understandable as like showing why they have actually been so successful. I mean, we are learning about these different regions for a reason, and it was interesting over the last couple of weeks to learn about Western Europe, East Asian cultures, and then the Japanese type culture, and kind of relating from any business experience that we've had internationally or like learning about international business. But it kind of made me put together the perspective of how even like my dad was able to work with a Japanese company and why they could be so successful. But I mean, there's times that we just have to learn and adjust. And yes, they're very, that harmonious, direct, like very education based type people. Whereas we do have those type of people, but we have to work together to actually be successful. I mean, some of the things are pretty different, but kind of the same. I mean, there's a lot to learn from the Japanese, and if they can continue to be, the second largest economy, obviously they're doing something right. And this is definitely something I want to look more into just because they're continuing to grow. They've obviously done things for a reason. They may be a little bit more traditional, but they rely on that like societal change and understanding and working together. Whereas in the United States, we're so individualized sometimes where that individualism is not necessarily the most productive lifestyle we could have. But going off that was some huge takeaways and understanding that I had and just kind of relating to a personal aspect of my life. But thank you.